Commander Marcus Chun stared at the data pad in disbelief, his weathered hands trembling slightly as he read the colony manifest for the third time. New Terra Station, humanity's most remote outpost on the edge of vegan space, was about to receive its most unusual resident. A honey badger? Chief Engineer Jake Rodriguez peered over Marcus's shoulder, his dark eyes widening. Command actually approved shipping a honey badger 37 light-years from Earth? Apparently so. Marcus set down the pad and rubbed his temples. Says here it's part of some Terran wildlife preservation initiative. The thing's been in cryo for 18 months. The door to the command center hissed open, and Dr. Samuel Hayes, the station's xenobiologist, rushed in with barely contained excitement. Marcus, did you see the manifest? They're sending us a Malivera capensis. Do you have any idea how significant this is? It's a waste of resources, Sam. Marcus stood and walked to the viewport, gazing out at the barren landscape of New Terra. The planet was a rocky, mountainous world with sparse vegetation. Hardly the African savanna a honey badger would call home. We're barely scraping by out here with essential supplies, and they send us a pet. Not a pet, Sam corrected, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. Honey badgers are remarkable creatures. Pound for pound, they're one of the most fearless and tenacious animals on Earth. There are documented cases of them fighting off lions, surviving cobra bites, and none of that matters out here, Jake interrupted. What's it going to do? Growl at the vegan patrol ships? The three men had been stationed on New Terra for 2 years, establishing humanity's foothold in this contested region of space. The vegan empire had been encroaching on human territory for decades, testing boundaries and probing for weaknesses. New Terra Station served as both an early warning system and a show of human resolve. Though with only 57 personnel, it felt more like a gesture than a fortress. The transport arrives in 6 hours, Marcus said finally. Sam, you're in charge of our new resident. Set up a habitat in Cargo Bay 3, and for God's sake, make sure it's secure. As the men dispersed to their duties, none of them noticed the small, sleek probe that had been observing their station from the asteroid field nearby. Aboard the vegan scout vessel Talon's Edge, Subcommander Zethkar analyzed the intercepted transmissions with growing interest. The humans have received a new shipment, he reported to his superior, Commander Vasktar. Some kind of biological specimen. Vasktar's reptilian features twisted into what might have passed for a smile among his species. Excellent. Our intelligence suggests they're already stretched thin. Any disruption to their operations will make our task easier. The vegans had been planning to test New Terra Station's defenses for months. With their superior technology and numbers, it should have been a simple matter to overwhelm the outpost. But humans had an annoying habit of surprising their enemies, and Vasktar preferred to stack the odds in his favor. Monitor their communications, he ordered, and prepare the assault troops. We strike at dawn. Back on New Terra Station, the transport vessel Lucky Strike touched down on the landing pad with a gentle thrum of engines. Captain Maria Santos, the ship's grizzled pilot, supervised the unloading with military precision. Careful with that cryopod, she called to the loading crew. That little guy's been sleeping for a long time. He's going to be cranky when he wakes up. Marcus watched from the observation deck as the cylindrical container was wheeled into the station. Through the transparent aluminum window, he could see the small, dark form of the honey badger suspended in cryosleep. It looked deceptively peaceful, almost cute, if he was being honest. What do you think, Commander? Sam appeared beside him, practically vibrating with scientific curiosity. Ready to meet Earth's most fearless mammal? As ready as I'll ever be, Marcus replied, though he couldn't shake the feeling that their lives were about to become much more complicated. Neither of them realized just how right he was. The honey badger's awakening was anything but peaceful. Dr. Samuel Hayes had prepared Cargo Bay 3 with meticulous care, climate-controlled environment, appropriate bedding, and even a selection of foods that might appeal to their new resident. What he hadn't prepared for was the sheer, unbridled fury of a honey badger waking up in an unfamiliar place. Jesus Christ! Jake Rodriguez leaped backward as the creature erupted from its transport crate like a furry missile. That thing's got more attitude than a hungover Marine. The honey badger, officially designated as HB001, but quickly dubbed Badger by the crew, proceeded to demolish his carefully constructed habitat with methodical efficiency. Food bowls flew, bedding scattered, and the reinforced barriers that were supposed to contain him proved woefully inadequate. "Fascinating," Sam muttered, scribbling notes on his data pad while pressed against the far wall. "Look at those claws work. The sheer determination is remarkable." "Remarkable isn't the word I'd use," Marcus said dryly, watching through the observation window as Badger began testing every surface, corner, and potential escape route in the bay. More like concerning. Within an hour, it became clear that Badger had no intention of remaining confined. The creature had already identified 3 potential weaknesses in the containment area and was systematically working on the most promising, a ventilation grate near the floor. "We can't let it loose in the station," Jake protested. "It could damage critical systems or worse." "Agreed," Marcus said, then paused as an idea struck him. "But maybe we don't have to contain it." "Sam, what do you know about honey badger behavior in the wild?" Sam's eyes lit up. "They're incredibly territorial and protective. In their natural habitat, they establish large ranges that they defend fiercely. If Badger considers the station his territory, he'll protect it," Marcus finished. "It's worth a try. Jake, disable the containment barriers. Let's see what happens." "Are you insane?" Jake stared at his commander. "That thing could be anywhere in the station within minutes." "That's the point." Marcus activated the intercom system. "All personnel, this is the commander. We're releasing HB001 into the general station population as of 1,400 hours. Do not attempt to capture or confine the animal. Report any sightings to Dr. Hayes immediately." As the barriers retracted, Badger paused in his destructive activities and tilted his head, as if sensing the change. Then, with purposeful strides, he trotted out of Cargo Bay 3 and disappeared into the station's maze of corridors. "This is either brilliant or catastrophically stupid," Jake muttered. "With our luck, probably both," Marcus replied. For the first few hours, reports flooded in from all over the station. Badger had been spotted in the mess hall, investigating the food dispensers, the engineering section, examining the power conduits, and even the command center, where he'd somehow managed to activate 3 different console displays before moving on. But as the day progressed, something remarkable happened. The reports stopped coming in not because Badger had disappeared, but because the crew was getting used to him. The honey badger seemed to be conducting a systematic patrol of the entire facility, mapping every corner and corridor with the thoroughness of a security chief. "He's learning the station layout," Sam observed during the evening briefing. "Classic territorial behavior. He's establishing his domain." "Any damage reports?" Marcus asked. "Surprisingly few," Jake admitted grudgingly. He chewed through some non-essential cables in Section C, but nothing critical. And he seems to have claimed the auxiliary storage room as his den. What they didn't know was that Badger had also detected something else during his patrol, unfamiliar scents near the ventilation intake from the planet's surface. His keen senses had picked up traces of the vegan reconnaissance team that had infiltrated the station's perimeter the night before. Unlike the humans, Badger didn't need sophisticated sensors or thermal imaging to know that danger was approaching. His instincts, honed by millions of years of evolution, told him that predators were stalking his new territory. And if there was one thing a honey badger understood better than anything else, it was how to deal with predators. At 0347 station time, the attack began. Commander Vasktar had chosen his moment carefully, the deep hours of the night cycle when human alertness was at its lowest. His assault team of 12 vegan warriors moved like shadows across New Terra's rocky surface, their adaptive camouflage rendering them nearly invisible to the station's external sensors. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Infiltrate through the auxiliary air intake, neutralize key personnel while they slept, and seize control of the communication array before the humans could send a distress signal. Clean, quiet, and efficient. Exactly the sort of operation the vegan military prided itself on. What they hadn't counted on was Badger. The honey badger had been conducting his nightly patrol when the first vegan warrior squeezed through the intake vent. To human senses, the infiltrator was virtually undetectable. His suit's technology suppressed heat signatures, muffled sound, and even neutralized scent markers. But Badger's senses operated on a different level entirely. The subtle displacement of air, the microscopic skin flakes that even the most advanced filtration couldn't eliminate, the barely perceptible vibration of foreign footsteps, all of it registered in the honey badger's consciousness like a klaxon alarm. In the command center, Lieutenant Tom Morrison was pulling the night watch, fighting off drowsiness with his third cup of coffee when the proximity alarms began shrieking. What the hell? He spun toward his console, fingers flying over the controls. Commander Chan, to the bridge. We've got multiple contacts on the perimeter sensors. But even as Tom's voice echoed through the station's communication system, the real battle was already beginning in the ventilation shafts above his head. The first vegan warrior never saw what hit him. One moment he was crawling through the ductwork toward his assigned target. The next he was face to face with 30 pounds of pure, concentrated fury. Badger's claws found gaps in the alien's armor with surgical precision, and his powerful jaws clamped down on vital equipment components. The warrior's scream of pain and surprise echoed through the vents, followed by a series of crashes as the struggle sent both combatants tumbling through access panels and into the corridor below. Was that? Jake Rodriguez emerged from his quarters, tool belt hastily fastened around his waist, just in time to see a camouflaged figure writhing on the deck while Badger methodically dismantled his equipment. Holy shit, is that a vegan? The honey badger looked up from his work, made what sounded suspiciously like a satisfied grunt, then trotted off toward the next section of the station where similar sounds of combat were beginning to echo. In the command center, Marcus arrived to find Tom staring at his displays in bewilderment. Sir, I'm reading 12 distinct infiltration signatures, but Tom gestured helplessly at his screens. Half of them are offline already. The other half are moving erratically, like they're in combat, but our personnel are all accounted for. Marcus felt a slow smile spreading across his face. No, Tom, not all of them. Throughout the station, the pattern repeated itself. Vegan warriors, trained for decades in the art of silent infiltration, found themselves facing an opponent whose very existence defied their understanding of warfare. Badger didn't follow human tactical doctrine. He didn't need to coordinate with a team or maintain communication protocols. He simply identified threats to his territory and eliminated them with the single-minded determination that had made honey badgers legendary on Earth. Commander Vasktar, monitoring the operation from his ship, watched in growing disbelief as his elite infiltration team was systematically neutralized by what his sensors could only identify as a small biological entity of unknown classification. Report! He snarled into his communicator. What is your status? The response came through bursts of static and sounds of struggle. Unknown. Contact. Equipment damaged. Some kind of... By dawn, it was over. 12 vegan infiltrators lay scattered throughout New Terra Station, their equipment destroyed, their mission in ruins. And in the auxiliary storage room that had become his den, Badger was calmly grooming himself, occasionally pausing to examine a piece of alien technology that had caught his interest. I can't believe it, Sam whispered, reviewing the security footage for the dozenth time. One honey badger just single-handedly defeated an elite vegan assault team. Marcus nodded slowly, a new respect evident in his eyes as he watched Badger on the monitor. Note to command. Request immediate upgrade of HB001's status from biological specimen to security consultant. But their celebration was premature. The infiltration had been only the first phase of Vasktar's plan, and the vegan commander was far from finished with New Terra Station. The bombardment began at noon. Commander Vasktar had abandoned all pretense of subtlety. If his elite infiltrators couldn't take the station quietly, he would simply pound it into submission with superior firepower. The Talon's Edge and her 2 escort vessels maintained a safe distance while their particle cannons methodically targeted the station's shield generators and defensive systems. Shield strength down to 40%. Tom Morrison called out over the thunder of impacting energy bolts. "Sir, at this rate we've got maybe 20 minutes before they breach the hull." Marcus gripped the command chair as another salvo rocked the station. Through the chaos of alarms and shouted orders, one thought kept running through his mind. They were massively outgunned. New Terra Station had been designed as an observation post and supply depot, not a fortress. Against 3 vegan warships, they might as well be throwing rocks. "Jake, what's the status on the emergency beacon?" he shouted. "Still transmitting, but the nearest fleet elements are 6 hours away." Jake's voice crackled over the comm from the engineering section. "We need to hold out until then." "With what?" Tom asked grimly. "Our defensive array consists of 4-point defense turrets and a handful of mining charges. They've got enough firepower to glass this entire continent." As if to emphasize the point, another series of impacts sent shockwaves through the station's superstructure. In the auxiliary storage room, Badger looked up from his current project, disassembling a vegan communication device with the methodical precision of a master engineer, and tilted his head thoughtfully. The honey badger had spent the morning examining the equipment taken from the defeated infiltrators. Unlike the humans, who saw only alien technology too advanced to comprehend, Badger's mind worked in patterns of cause and effect, action and reaction. He understood that the loud noises and shaking were connected to the flying things outside, just as he understood that the broken devices in his den had once belonged to the intruders. What the humans didn't realize was that honey badgers were problem solvers by nature. Faced with a beehive 40 feet up a tree, they found a way to climb. Confronted with a cobra's venomous bite, they developed resistance. Presented with any obstacle, they simply refused to accept that it couldn't be overcome. And right now, Badger was looking at the biggest problem he'd ever encountered. "Sam!" Marcus's voice echoed through the intercom. "Where's our security consultant?" Dr. Hayes checked his portable scanner, tracking the biometric chip they'd hastily implanted in Badger during his medical evaluation. "He's moving through the maintenance tunnels, heading toward—" "Wait, that can't be right. What is it?" "According to this, he's heading for the external docking port, the one that leads directly outside the station." Marcus felt his blood run cold. He's trying to escape? But even as he spoke, he knew that wasn't right. In the past 18 hours, he'd learned enough about honey badgers to understand that they didn't run from threats. They eliminated them. Outside New Terra Station, the rocky terrain was being systematically cratered by stray shots from the vegan bombardment. The 3 warships hung in the pale sky like mechanical vultures, their weapon systems charging for another devastating salvo. Commander Vasktar studied the tactical display with satisfaction. The human shields were failing, their defensive systems were offline, and their communications array was a twisted ruin of metal and circuitry. Victory was moments away. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting a small breach in the station's hull. Sector 7, near their maintenance section. Probably structural failure from our bombardment." Vasktar dismissed. "Continue firing. I want that station reduced to—" His words were cut off by an alarm from the ship's internal sensors. "Sir, we have a hull breach on Deck 4. Something just appeared in the cargo bay." Vasktar spun toward his security station. "Appeared? What do you mean, appeared?" The answer came in the form of screams echoing through the ship's communication system, followed by the distinctive sound of equipment being systematically destroyed. On the security monitors, the crew caught glimpses of a small, dark form moving with impossible speed through the ship's corridors, leaving chaos in its wake. "How?" Vasktar demanded. "How did it get aboard my ship?" What he didn't know was that Badger had solved the problem with typically straightforward honey badger logic. The flying things were attacking his territory, therefore they needed to be eliminated. The quickest way to eliminate them was to get inside them. And the quickest way to get inside them was to hitch a ride on one of the energy bolts they kept firing at the station. It was insane, suicidal, and completely impossible by any reasonable standard of physics. But honey badgers had never been particularly concerned with what was reasonable, and evolution had equipped them with a stubborn refusal to accept the impossible. Somehow, through a combination of perfect timing, incredible luck, and sheer bloody-minded determination, Badger had managed to grab onto a disabled piece of station debris that had been caught in a tractor beam and pulled aboard the vegan flagship for analysis. Now he was loose inside the Talon's Edge, and he was very, very angry. The destruction of the Talon's Edge took exactly 14 minutes. Commander Marcus Chun watched in stunned disbelief as the massive vegan warship began listing to port, secondary explosions rippling along its hull like a string of firecrackers. Through the chaos of the bombardment, his tactical officer was receiving the most bizarre damage reports in military history. "Sir, the flagship's weapon systems just went offline," Tom Morrison reported, his voice tight with confusion. "And I'm detecting massive power fluctuations throughout their ship. It's like something's systematically destroying their internal systems." On the main screen, the Talon's Edge continued its death spiral, plasma venting from dozens of hull breaches while its escort vessels frantically tried to establish communication. The bombardment had stopped entirely as the surviving vegan ships focused all their attention on whatever was happening aboard their command vessel. "Internal sensors are picking up something," Tom continued, squinting at his displays. "Small object moving through their ship at... That can't be right. No biological entity could survive the internal temperature spikes they're registering." But Marcus was beginning to understand. "It's not just any biological entity, Tom. It's a honey badger." Through the observation port of New Terra Station, they watched the impossible unfold. The Talon's Edge, pride of the vegan fleet, was being taken apart from the inside by 30 pounds of Earth's most stubborn mammal. Aboard the dying warship, Commander Vasktar fought to maintain control as his bridge erupted in sparks and alarms. "Engineering report," he screamed into his communicator. "What's the status of our power core?" The response came through bursts of static. "Something's chewed through the primary conduits. The coolant systems are failing. We're reading cascading failures throughout the entire..." The transmission cut off in a burst of interference, followed by another series of explosions that sent the ship spinning end over end. Badger had indeed found the ship's power core, and with the same methodical determination he'd once used to raid beehives in the African savanna, he was dismantling it piece by piece. The vegan technology, for all its sophistication, had never been designed to withstand an assault from within by a creature that simply refused to acknowledge that certain things were impossible. Cooling lines that should have been inaccessible were somehow being severed. Control systems that were supposedly tamper-proof were being reduced to sparking wreckage. And through it all, a small dark form moved through the ship's maintenance spaces like a force of nature, following the simple honey badger principle that any problem could be solved by applying sufficient determination and really impressive claws. "Sir," Vasktar's tactical officer gasped, struggling with his controls as more systems failed around them. "We're losing structural integrity. The power core's going critical." Vasktar looked around his ruined bridge, at the scattered bodies of his crew and the sparking remains of his instruments. In all his years of military service, he had never imagined that his flagship would be destroyed by what his sensors could only identify as small mammalian life form, origin unknown. "Abandon ship," he whispered, then louder. "All hands abandon ship. Emergency evacuation. Protocol 7. The escape pods began launching just as the Talon's Edge's power core went critical. The explosion lit up New Terra's sky like a second sun, and the shockwave rattled the station's reinforced windows. When the light faded, only debris remained where the mighty warship had been. The two escort vessels, their commanders apparently having no desire to face whatever had destroyed their flagship, jumped to hyperspace without bothering with formal surrender protocols. In the sudden silence that followed, Marcus found himself staring at the empty space where 3 enemy warships had been just minutes before. "Status report," he said finally. "All systems green." Jake's voice came over the comm, tinged with amazement. "Minor structural damage from the bombardment, but nothing we can't repair. And sir, I'm getting a signal from one of the escape pods. Put it through." Commander Vasktar's voice filled the command center, defeated and hollow. New Terra Station. This is Commander Vasktar of the Vegan Imperial Navy. I formally surrender my remaining forces to your custody. And I request. No, I beg you to tell me what manner of weapon you used against my ship. Marcus exchanged glances with Sam and Jake, then keyed his microphone. Commander, I'm afraid that information is classified, but I can tell you this Earth takes the protection of its colonies very seriously. And we have resources that you clearly weren't prepared for. There was a long pause before Vasktar responded. Understood. We will not test your defenses again. As the vegan escape pods were tractored aboard for processing, Dr. Hayes checked his scanner one more time. I'm picking up Badger's signal, he reported. He appears to be in the debris field from the vegan ship, but the readings are stable. 6 hours later, when the rescue ships from the human fleet arrived, they found New Terra Station intact and its crew in good spirits. They also found a honey badger floating peacefully in an improvised pressure suit that appeared to have been cobbled together from vegan survival equipment, wearing what could only be described as a satisfied expression. How? Admiral Sarah Chen, no relation to Marcus, despite the name, asked as she reviewed the after-action reports. How does one honey badger destroy an entire vegan warship? Marcus looked out at the debris field, where recovery teams were still pulling salvageable technology from the wreckage. In the corner of the command center, Badger was methodically examining a piece of alien circuitry, occasionally testing different components with his teeth. Admiral, Marcus said finally, I don't think it's a question of how. I think it's a question of why not. And the answer is, because honey badgers don't care about impossible odds. They just see a problem and solve it. Sam looked up from his data pad, where he'd been compiling his research notes. I've been thinking about submitting a proposal to command. If one honey badger can do this much damage to enemy operations. Don't even think about it, Jake interrupted. One badger is enough. Any more and they'd probably take over the entire sector. Marcus nodded gravely. Agreed. Some weapons are too powerful to deploy casually. And in his corner, Badger looked up from his examination of the alien technology, fixed the humans with a steady gaze that seemed to say, damn right, and went back to his work. After all, there was always another problem to solve.